This video is everything you need to know about every single melee class in spec and how they perform in PvP on World of Warcraft Cataclysm expansion. This comes from my experience of playing on this expansion for almost 10 years on different private servers. I have played multiple classes to rank 1s, Arena Master and Duelist titles, mostly as a Retribution Paladin, Unholy Death Knight, Arms Warrior, but also some Warlock, Healer and even Tank specs. Your own experience may differ from mine depending on when and on what servers you played, so if you agree or disagree with anything I say, feel free to comment and discuss. I always read every comment under my videos. We have 5 tiers, from S tier, where the best specs are, all the way to F tier, which are mostly unplayable for any competitive PvP. I will talk about how much damage can the class and spec do, its healing capabilities, defensive abilities and crowd control, what brackets they excel and suck at, as well as the best arena comps for that specific class and spec. I will also include timestamps in the video, if I don't forget, but we will go through the classes in the order as you can see them on screen, starting from the plate, armor wearing classes to mail and finishing with leather. First on the list is one of my favorites, the Retribution Paladin. Paladin is a hybrid class and so it has a little bit of everything in each spec. Red has an insane burst. It is one of the best burst damagers in the game, but in PvP this is easily countered through crowd control, stuns, disarms, spheres, etc. So you will oftentimes find yourself having to use your burst cooldowns separately. You have your Guardian of Ancient Kings, which once you stack to max, you pop your Zealotry, Avenging Wrath combined with unused DPS trinket, and you hit for 50% of enemies' HP no matter what resilience they have. You have some of the worst sustained DPS though, so you can't do much pressure outside of your cooldowns. Same goes for healing. Once you pop your burst cooldowns, your healing is also vastly improved. With only 10-second cooldown on your main healing ability, Word of Glory, which can literally heal for as much as Lay on Hands would, you are the best supporter DPS class in the game. If that wasn't enough, your Flashes of Light can also help a bit too, in times when you can afford to hardcast. Keep in mind, however, that these will cost a ton of mana. You also have Sacred Shield. This is much different from the Sacred Shield spell as you were used to it back in Wrath of Lich King. On Cataclysm, this is a passive on a 1-minute internal cooldown that procs automatically every time you reach 30% HP. It gives you an absorption shield which also improves healing on you while it is active. The amount it absorbs can also be further boosted by using your burst cooldowns since it scales with your strength. So make sure to use your burst cooldowns before Sacred Shield procs to have even more absorb and longer duration on it. Reds overall have never had many defensive abilities, and the only real defensive is Divine Protection, which grants you 20% damage reduction. You obviously have your Divine Shield aka Bubble for complete immunity to everything, but it also decreases your damage done. Hand of Protection for physical damage immunity against melees or hunters, but it can be dispelled or purged, and also Hand of Freedom and Sacrifice to further boost your supporter role. Mobility has never been Paladin's strength, but at least you can remove slows and roots from yourself using Cleanse. You have very little crowd control. You can Hammer of Justice and Repentance every minute, which apply a stun and an incapacitate to your target respectively. You can also Holy Rat stun and Churn Evil Fear undead minions, such as Death Knight's ghouls and gargoyles, Warlock's pets, and even Death Knights themselves if they use Lichborn. Paladins excel in solo PvP. They can be played in a number of top tier comps in 2v2, including Retribution plus Unholy DK, Marksmanship Hunter, Enhancement Shaman, Sub-Rogue, but also with Ferals, Frost or Fire Mages, Beast Mastery Hunters, and even Disciplined Priests if you like longer games. They aren't as extremely impressive in 3v3, but still a solid pick. You will see them played with the aforementioned DPS classes, plus a healer, usually a Disciplined Priest or Resto Shaman, but Resto Druid is also a decent option. Reds can also be played in triple DPS comp, ideally with a Marksmanship Hunter and a Subtlety Rogue. For BGs, they are okay, but not amazing. If you can support your team with your Hands of Freedom, Protection, Lay on Hands, and Word of Glory while doing some nice damage, you will be good, but you will have a hard time getting in a rated BG group. For these reasons, it is an A tier spec. Since they're overall better classes than Red, they also excel in Battlegrounds while being some of the best for arenas as well. Arms Warriors got nerfed AF on Cataclysm. Between Wrath of Lich King, Cataclysm, and Mists of Pandaria, this is by far the worst Arms has been. since they are overpowered on both of the other expansions. They still have an incredible damage inside but also outside of cooldowns. Warrior is a killing machine. Incredible single target damage and probably the best on-demand AoE damage with Bladestorm. What makes Arms Warrior special is the Mortal Strike ability that reduces healing done by the enemy. The problem comes in PvP, where you will oftentimes get crowd control and will be unable to hit the enemy for very long periods of time. And since Warrior lacks gap closers, just having charge on a pretty long cooldown and leap on 1 minute cooldown isn't enough. You will struggle hard even touching classes like mages or anything with a rogue or feral partner. Even though you have slows compared to Paladin, which has none, Warrior slows are the worst in the game. You have to apply Hamstring or Piercing Howl manually, it costs you a global cooldown, and it is only a 50% slow, while rogues have an automatic 70% slow applied with their melee hits. You have almost no healing. You can use Victory Rush for healing only once you get a killing blow, so pretty much useless in an arena situation, and your Enraged Regeneration is on a long cooldown. You have a few defensive cooldowns, namely Shield Wall, but even then if you get disarmed, you can't use it. And it is on an unbelievably long 5-minute cooldown. Don't forget, you need to switch to a one-handed weapon and a shield to be able to use it, so your damage then also sucks throughout its duration. Same with Spell Reflect, even Shield Block, which essentially doesn't even do much for you at all. You have a decent crowd control, short charge stun, fear on a 2-minute cooldown, disarm, and throwdown, which is a stun. The worst stun in the game, which can be dodged and parried, which happens quite often, so you will want to use it within your charge's stun duration to secure it lands. In 1v1, Arms Warriors are trash. Straight up probably the worst spec of all of them. Never play alone unless you can outplay others. 2v2 is better, but you will need a healer with you, ideally a Holy Paladin or Resto Shaman. Resto Druid is also good. Disc Priest is playable but far from optimal. I have also played this comp with the Retribution Paladin up to around 2500 rating on the Rootless PvP season, making me rank 1 Arms Warrior at that time, so that is also totally playable. And I have seen one person play Arms with a Marksmanship Hunter. These are super fast games and require great communication and perfect timing. In 3v3 is where Warrior becomes really competitive. You can play with Hunters, Ferals, Affliction Warlocks, but even Death Knights, Retributions, or Mages. And add a healer like a Resto Shaman, Holy Paladin, or Resto Druid on top of that, and you could totally attack the top ranks. In Battlegrounds, you're mostly useless. Warriors die too easily, but you could also be a good target and kill caller if you can communicate with your teammates properly on Discord. Overall, especially comparing Arms Warriors to other expansions, Cataclysm is really tough on them, but it is a fun playstyle nonetheless, just a bit frustrating. I can't put it higher than C tier if I compare it to the other specs on the list. For the Fury spec, that is even worse than Arms. Sure, it looks cool wielding 2 big two-handed weapons, but I hope it looks good to you from the graveyard, because that is where you will spend most of your time as Fury. You do crazy stupid damage in your burst. The problem is, that burst you only have every 5 minutes, while other classes usually have their burst ready every 2 minutes. Your Recklessness is a 5-minute cooldown, and your Death Wish is a 3-minute cooldown. Your sustained damage sucks. You have some decent healing with Bloodthirst, which is your main DPS ability, a bit better healing than Arms for sure, pretty much the same defensives as Arms, and you lose the throwdown stun. It can be kind of fun playing duels as Fury, but you aren't gonna kill too many classes. You will never see a Fury Warrior in Arena or Battlegrounds, or ever in the game, not even in PvE. Very few people play it, and it is for a reason. It is a bad spec in every situation. For fun, sure, but you will be furious, literally, by how often you will feel useless. And useless specs go into F tier. Death Knights on Cataclysm are amazing, in every single spec, but Unholy is the best PvP spec by far. It has everything, amazing burst damage with Unholy Frenzy, Dark Transformation and Gargoyle, but even pretty decent sustained damage. Majority of Unholy's damage comes from his dots and pets. It isn't very mobile, but you also have some really good snares with Chains of Ice on demand and Desecrated Ground automatic slows, and of course the kill caller Death Grip. You can even heal yourself pretty well every 2 minutes with Death Pact and crazy good Lichborn when combined with AMS and fighting casters or anyone with magical damage. Worst case scenario, you can also use Death Strike to heal, but then you will lose on a lot of damage. Really good defensive cooldowns too. The aforementioned Anti-Magic Shell, which is a nightmare for any mage, warlock or priest. Anti-Magic Zone as the only Death Knight spec, Icebound Fortitude, which also removes and prevents stuns on you. Decent crowd control with Pet Sleep to interrupt and root targets when the pet is in Dark Transformation, Pet Stun on a 1-minute cooldown, and Strangulate Silence. You are extremely good in 1v1, only really countered by Rogues and Ferals, or by a good Retribution Paladin or Hunter. You can play in 2v2 as double DPS, ideally with a Retribution Paladin, but also with a Marksmanship Hunter, similarly to Arms Warriors, for faster, more bursty arenas, and you can also play with healers since you have so much pressure. Best healers for you include Holy Paladin and Resto Shaman. There are many viable comps in 3v3 for Unholy, with a Marksmanship Hunter, Retribution Paladin, Arms Warrior, Feral, Affliction Warlock, Shadow Priest. Combine that with a Resto Shaman, Holy Paladin, or even Resto Druid or Disc Priest, and you can go all the way to rank 1 easy. You're pretty good for BGs, again very similar to Warrior for kill calling. Your Death Grip in Battlegrounds is insanely crucial ability, so if you can use it right to secure a kill, your team will love you. Unholy DK is definitely one of the best specs in PvP and is a very deserved high A tier, maybe even S tier. A tier for now. Frost Death Knight is also very good. It has even better sustained damage than Unholy. It can burst every single minute with Pillar of Frost. You can even choose between different talent builds that change your playstyle. You can play with a 2-hander or 2 one-hand weapons. You can specialize in Necrotic Strikes or Obliterates, or even Howling Blast if you want to do crazy AoE damage, mostly good for BGs. It is also one of the easier specs to play overall, so if you don't like complicated rotations, this might be a good spec for you. However, it doesn't have as strong Lichborn healing since Frost Death Coils aren't nearly as strong, and neither is his AMS. It also lacks the AMZ, but you gain improved Chains of Ice, which not only slow the target, but also root it in place, which is extremely powerful for Battlegrounds especially. You also have the Hungering Cold ability to freeze all your targets near you. Due to the lack of healing and defensives, Frost isn't as amazing in PvP overall compared to Unholy. It struggles in 1v1. In 2v2 you could play it with similar classes as Unholy, but people will usually prefer to play with a Death Knight in Unholy spec rather than Frost. Same for 3v3. I have probably seen one Frost Death Knight in all of those years of playing Cataclysm that could really pull it off and get near rank 1 with the spec, but it's more of an exception, not a rule. I would compare Frost Death Knight to an Arms Warrior. Frost is better in many regards, but lacks the Mortal Strike ability. But you also get so many different playstyles with Frost, and much like Unholy, you still have the Death Grip to pull enemies and kill them. I would place Frost DK in the same category as Arms. Enhancement Shaman is not a very popular class in Cataclysm, but it is very strong nonetheless. It is similar to Retribution Paladin in that it is also a hybrid class. It has an okay sustained damage, but even better burst with his wolves. It can move fast, it has mobility, but also snares with Frost Chalk for single target and Totem for AoE, which is super annoying if you're fighting a Shaman. Since it is a hybrid class, your off healing is amazing. It takes time until you stack it, but the heals are sometimes even comparable to those of Retribution. Your only defensive cooldown is Shamanistic Rage, which is only on 1 minute cooldown, but you need to use it right. It reduces damage taken by 30% and is also usable while stunned, and it also removes magical stuns such as Paladin's Hammer of Justice or Mage's Deep Freeze. Outside of your slows, you have Hex, which is a casted spell that serves as a crowd control similar to Polymorph. Your Frost Shock can also freeze targets if used on a longer distance, but that's about it. No other crowd control abilities for Shaman. Shamans are one of the best classes for 1v1. They are great in 2v2 with Retribution Paladin, but also with a Discipline Priest. I haven't seen too many Enhancement Shamans in arenas, but I have seen like 2 people at really high rating on Cataclysm with the spec. In 3v3 you can play with an Arms Warrior, Ret Paladin or a Hunter, and add a Disc Priest to it and you could do really well. For BGs, you're mostly useless. LE Shaman is way better. I put Enhance in the B tier above Arms and Frost DK since Enhance does way better in 1v1 situations and a bit better in 2v2. Feral Druids are one of the most busted classes on Cataclysm. If you can't play the game, just roll a Feral Druid, keybind the bear form and backpedal. You will do just fine. It is ridiculous seeing all the Feral Druids and bear forms being attacked by 5 people and still unkillable. Ferals do crazy damage, both sustain and burst with berserk and bleeds. Probably the best sustained damage in the game since they're also the most mobile class in the game, so unlike warriors, Ferals can actually stick to their target much easier. They also have their snares applied automatically through melee attacks. Another hybrid class with insane off-healing, Life Bloom, Rejuvenation, Regrowth, and if that wasn't enough, you can jump in bear form for frenzied regeneration and never die. Bark Skin reduces your damage taken by 20% on a 1-minute cooldown. You have some of the best crowd control in the entire game. Roots, either hard casted or with Nature's Grasp instant, on whoever touches you. Cyclone, a crowd control ability with no cooldown, so you can spam it on multiple targets. Also hardcast or instant. Bash Stun, Maim Stun, Pound Stun, Charge Root, and I'm sure I'm still forgetting about something. And you can also counter rogues with your Fairy Fire ability that prevents them from stealthing. You are the king of 1v1. Rogue, Marksmanship Hunter, and Feral are the best 3 uncontested classes that dominate 1v1 in my opinion. You can play in a bunch of top 2v2 comps, including Feral Rogue, Marksmanship Hunter, Ret Paladin, and since your damage is so insane, you can also easily play with healers like Disc Priest or Holy Paladin and do just fine. In 3v3 with the aforementioned, or even Arms Warrior, Affliction Warlock, Unholy Death Knight, or Enhancement Shaman, plus Discipline Priest or Holy Paladin, and you are a top candidate for rank 1. With the best mobility in the game and some of the best defensive abilities comes the rank of the best flag carrier on Cataclysm period. So you will be more than welcome in any battleground rated or non-rated group. I think it's clear now that Feral is a prime candidate for the S tier. The best for last, Rogue. And if you know me and my videos, you know what is coming, because Rogue is the best. Not the best in sustained damage though, it is good, but their burst is on another level. Starting with Subtlety spec, Shadow Dance is on a 1-minute cooldown, so it is a very frequent burst. Rogue's damage becomes even more overpowered on the last PvP season, Cataclysmic, since it is the only class that can get a legendary in Dragon Soul raid. That, in combination with Bonelink trinkets, makes even Subtlety's sustained damage one of the best in the game. Rogues have insane healing. Recuperate is a heal with pretty much 100% uptime that gives you some 4 to 5% HP every few seconds. Rogue's defensives might be the actual best in the game. Evasion making you unhittable on melee, Cloak of Shadows making you immune to any spell damage, and Vanish making you straight up just get the F out of the fight. Combat Readiness decreasing damage taken to a point where you take almost 0 damage. And of course, your immense crowd control toolkit helps too. Smoke Bomb, which is a new ability introduced with Cataclysm, it is an area of smoke through which you cannot cast or be casted onto. So if you are in Smoke Bomb, you can't deal damage to people outside of it, or you, as a rogue, can't be dealt damage into. Same with any healing. Then you have a Disarm on 1-minute cooldown, a bunch of stuns, Gouge, Incapacitate, Sap, Garrote Silence, and Blind. Your slows are automatically applied with your melee hits, and these slows really slow you down. You also have healing or casting time reduction through poisons. Decent mobility with sprint and shadow step, and if all else fails, you can reset some of your major cooldowns with preparation. Rogues are the king of 1v1, much like Ferals. They can play in a ton of the best 2v2 comps. With Frost or Fire Mages, Feral, Marksmanship Hunter, Retribution Paladin, even Warlock, Elemental Shaman or Shadow Priest, but those 3 aren't as amazing, and even with a Discipline Priest. In 3v3 again, with all the aforementioned, plus a Discipline Priest, or even Resto Shaman or Resto Druid. Rogues can be a real pain in the ass in Battlegrounds. They can smoke bomb a target that was death gripped by a Death Knight and secure a kill. They can control the game with all their stuns, saps, blinds, etc. And they can also ninja cap bases. S tier of course. Assassination and Combat then can't really compare to Subtlety. They have mostly the same core defensive and crowd control abilities, they just might be losing 1 or 2 of them and don't have the Shadow Dance burst. Assassination specializes in poisons, It has Vendetta, which prevents, for instance, rogues from vanishing from you. It does great damage but lacks the 1-minute burst and better crowd control. Combat is a rogue spec that is played with one-handed weapons instead of daggers. It has really good burst with Killing Spree and Adrenaline Rush, but with Adrenaline Rush being on a 3-minute cooldown, it can't really compare. Both of these specs, much like Fury Warrior for example, are a nice for fun addition to the game, but not really competitive and don't make much sense playing if you can already play the overpowered Subtlety spec. And much like Fury Warriors, I put them in F tier. And that's it. Now you know everything you'd need to know about melee classes in PvP on Cataclysm. Let me know how your experience differs from what I have said in this video. Like the video if you liked it, and look forward to a similar tier list with the rest of the classes and specs too.